The Longest Night 1. Chapter 1. The Storm's Warning. The first thing they tell you about winter in northern Minnesota is that it's unforgiving. What they don't tell you is that sometimes, on the longest nights of the year, it becomes something much worse. I should have known better than to take the shortcut through the old logging road when the storm warnings were blaring on every radio station. But I was desperate to get home before Christmas Eve, and the main highway was backed up for miles due to an earlier pileup. My GPS suggested the detour would save me 2 hours. 2 hours closer to home, to warmth, to family. What a fool I was. The snow started falling harder around 4 p.m., though it felt more like midnight with how dark the sky had become. My headlights carved twin tunnels through the whiteness. But beyond their reach was nothing but shadow and swirling snow. The old Subaru's heater wheezed as it fought against the dropping temperature, which had already plummeted to 15 below. That's when I saw the first set of tracks in the snow. They crossed the road in front of me. Massive prints, too big to be a wolf or a bear. They looked almost human, except each footprint was easily 2 feet long. And they were fresh, the edges still sharp despite the heavy snowfall. I slowed down, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. The rational part of my brain tried to dismiss it, probably. Just snow falling in weird patterns. But then I saw them again, and this time, they were walking parallel to my car. Chapter 2. The Cabin. The gas gauge needle was dropping faster than it should have been. The cold was affecting the engine, making it burn through fuel like a desperate man burns through matches in the dark. I needed to find shelter, and soon. That's when I saw it. A cabin, set back from the road about 50 yards. Smoke curled from its chimney, a beacon of hope in the growing darkness. I pulled into what I assumed was the driveway, though it was hard to tell under all the snow. The cabin looked old but well-maintained. No car in sight, but the smoke meant someone had to be home. I grabbed my emergency bag from the back seat and trudged through knee-deep snow to the front door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. The door creaked open slightly. It hadn't been latched properly. "Hello," I called out. "I'm sorry to intrude, but my car's almost out of gas, and the storm." The interior was warm, almost too warm. A fire roared in the stone fireplace, but there was no one in sight. The cabin was a single room with a small kitchen area, a bed in one corner, and a couple of chairs by the fire. Everything looked recently used. There was even a steaming mug of coffee on the small table. But something felt wrong. The air had a metallic tang to it, like copper pennies. That's when I noticed the scratches on the inside of the door. Deep gouges in the wood, as if something had tried desperately to get out. Chapter 3. The Visitor. I should have left right then. Should have gotten back in my car and taken my chances with the storm. But the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees, and the wind was howling like a wounded animal. I closed the door behind me, trying not to look at the scratches. The coffee on the table was still hot. Whoever lived here couldn't have been gone long. Maybe they'd just stepped out to get firewood. I stood by the fire, warming my frozen hands. That's when I heard it, a sound above the wind, coming from outside. A scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged through the snow. The footsteps came next. Not the crunch of boots on snow, but something softer, more deliberate. They circled the cabin once, twice. I stood perfectly still, barely breathing. The windows had frosted over, but through one clear patch, I saw a shadow pass by. It was tall, impossibly tall, and moved with an unnatural grace. The footsteps stopped at the door. Chapter 4. The Truth in the Basement. My phone had no signal, but I pulled it out anyway, using its light to look around for anything I could use as a weapon. That's when I noticed the trap door in the floor, partially hidden under a worn rug. The footsteps hadn't moved from the door, but they hadn't tried to come in either. Whatever was out there was waiting. With shaking hands, I pulled back the rug and found a heavy iron ring. The trap door opened with a groan that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet cabin. Wooden stairs led down into darkness. The smell that wafted up was worse than anything I'd ever encountered, decay and something else. Something ancient and wrong. I shouldn't have gone down. But I heard the front door starting to open, and down seemed better than whatever was coming in. The basement was a charnel house. Bodies, at least 3 of them, preserved by the cold. They looked weeks old, maybe months. All showed signs of having tried to defend themselves, broken fingers, defensive wounds. But worse than the bodies were the photographs on the walls. Dozens of them, dating back decades. Each showed the same thing: a figure, impossibly tall and thin, standing in the snow. In each photo, it was closer to the camera than in the last. And in the final photo, dated just last week, it was standing in this very basement. Chapter 5: The Longest Night. I heard the front door close upstairs. Slow, heavy footsteps crossed the floor above me. They stopped at the top of the basement stairs. The temperature dropped so rapidly I could see my breath. The beam from my phone caught. Movement in the corner, one of the bodies, was covered in frost, forming before my eyes. The steps began descending. My phone light flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard a sound like cracking ice and something else, a whisper, but not in any language I'd ever heard. It sounded like winter itself trying to speak. I pressed myself into a corner, behind what felt like a stack of old boxes. The steps reached the bottom, and I felt rather than saw something enter the basement. The air became so cold it burned to breathe. Then I saw it, not with my eyes, but somehow in my mind. Tall as the trees, thin as shadow, with skin like ice and eyes like the spaces between stars. It had been here forever, hunting on these long winter nights. The cabin was its trap, the warm fire its lure. I don't remember much after that. They found me 3 days later, half frozen but alive, wandering along the highway. The cabin, they said, had burned down decades ago. All that remained was a foundation and a cellar full of old bones. But every winter, when the nights are longest and the storms howl down from the north, people still go missing on that old logging road. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear something moving through the trees, following the tracks that lead to nowhere. They say the first thing you need to know about winter in northern Minnesota is that it's unforgiving. But what they should tell you is this: sometimes, the things that hunt in winter's darkness are patient. They can wait forever for the right moment, the right storm, the right victim. And they're still waiting out there, even now.